A little while back, I made a guide covering the most common debuffs and status effects you'd be contending with in Tactics Ogre Reborn. In that video, I promised a companion piece covering positive status effects and buffs. Today, we're doing just that. Hello everyone, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I'm doing my damnedest to put out as much Tactics Ogre content as I can prior to the launch of Fire Emblem Engage, as we'll be covering both games once that launch happens, and I mean, it might be a little chaotic, so. We're also shooting for 15k subs as the channel goal for this year, so if you want to stay on top of content for either of these games, or just want to support a small but growing channel, please subscribe. Thank you. As we did in the debuffs videos, we're going to run down the list of most common buffs first, as well as ways to apply them and ones you want to prioritize. Then, we'll be discussing positive status effects. I've discussed how important the various debuffs and status effects of Tactics Ogre Reborn are, but it also bears stating that your own buffs and positive statuses are just as important. There's a reason that there are consumables that you want on all of your units, like Array and Plumes and Spirit Stones of the Stars, to buff your physical and magical attack respectively, for example. These buffs give you a noticeable edge in battle and last a long time to boot. Yet they're just the tip of the iceberg. Between the various consumables you can use for nearly every buff in the game and abilities, such as the Swordmaster's Dances that apply them en masse, these buffs can come from a lot of sources. Here's the list of what you'll most commonly see. Attuned increases the resistance to the attached element. Fire Attuned increases fire resistance, for example. Touched, working similarly, provides bonus damage on hit of the attached element type. Again, Fire Touched adds fire damage. True Strike increases melee accuracy, True Flight increases ranged accuracy, Spell Strike increases magical accuracy, Strengthen increases physical damage, Spellcraft increases magical damage, Healcraft increases healing effectiveness, Dodge increases your melee avoid, Sidestep increases your ranged avoid, Fortified increases your physical defense, and Resilient increases your magical defense. Now, knowing what these buffs do is one thing, but where do they come from? How can you use them for yourself? Well, there's a few options. First is those consumables that I mentioned previously. Most of these buffs, with the exception of Attuned and Touched, are able to be applied by one-time use consumables, which can be purchased for a small fee at any shop. Once you have some extra funds to throw around, I highly recommend that you identify the buffs you want for your team and pick up plenty of these items to equip on your party. Having Strengthen and Spellcraft on command is a huge help, and situational buffs like Resilient when facing powerful mage bosses is also a must. Additionally, you can apply certain buffs with rare spells and skills. As I mentioned before, the Swordmaster is notable for this, with their ability to apply buffs like Strengthen and Fortify to basically the entire party with one application of a dance. Mages also can grant themselves Spell Strike, and Deneb can grant herself both Spell Strike and Spellcraft. But abilities such as these that apply these self-buffs are rather limited. Now, those are most of the buffs that you can apply, but what about Attuned and Touched? We did leave those out. Well, Attuned is a little bit more rare, and something you'll see most commonly applied by Rune Fencers or Valkyries. The Instill series of spells that you'll see on Rune Fencers and Valkyries grants Attuned as well as Touched. Speaking of Touched, there are more skills and spells that can apply it. As mentioned, the Instill series of spells will do the job, as can the Vartan's El-Khalas Winds, which grants Air Touched and True Strike. You can build some powerful synergistic teams by utilizing these abilities and spells to good effect. Now that'll do it for buffs, but what about positive status effects? These effects are often more impactful than simple buffs, allowing you to take turns more quickly, completely nullify certain attacks, and inflict big debuffs on the enemy. There's some good stuff to talk about here, though maybe not quite as much as the more negative side effects. That said, let's start with Quickened. You'll see Quickened often during your time with Tactics Ogre Reborn, either being cast on your units via the Boon of Swiftness spell, or being granted to enemies via Speed Star, an ability typically seen on enemy-only rogues and bosses. If you've played other JRPGs, especially Final Fantasy, you know what Quickened does. It's haste. If that doesn't ring a bell, essentially, Quickened makes your units faster by increasing the rate at which their RT goes down. The faster their RT goes down, the faster they get a new turn. This, of course, leads to increased utility and damage, as the more turns you take, the more you can do in a battle. And it also means more turn starts for units, which means more chances for auto skills to trigger, which is absolutely a nice bonus. Of course, if the enemy is quickened, they get all the same bonuses, so do watch out for that and try to focus fire a unit down if it's applying quickened to itself or other units. Next up we have Negate, and this is a nasty one. Negate completely nullifies the next spell or magical effect that targets the unit that has been granted it. You shouldn't need me to tell you that complete immunity from a spell or magical effect is very good. But in case you do, this is very good. Typically, you will only see this and the next status effect on the Patriarch or Matriarch class, or the Hoplite class, both of which are exclusive to demi-humans. When you're using said classes, great. When you're facing them in battle, less great. Especially considering that the skill which applies Negate, Intercession, is of course an auto skill, so you'll see it a lot if a unit is equipped with it. It is worth noting, however, that ninjutsu and war dances do remove this effect, so if you're fielding a Patriarch alongside some Swordmasters, for example, be careful you don't accidentally remove your own buff while trying to strengthen or fortify your team. It'll be a little annoying if you wind up doing so. Similarly to Negate, next up we have Nullify. Rather than blocking a magical effect or spell, Nullify blocks a physical attack, skill, or alarmingly item used on the bearer. You'll again see this status effect when Hoplites and Patriarchs/Matriarchs are on the field, and taken with the Negate skill, that makes them just as annoyingly tanky as you'd expect. They can activate simultaneously. It's pretty rough. The fact that Nullify blocks items is a strange choice as well. It does mean enemy units will wind up protected from your grenades or debuff consumables you use on them, and it also prevents you from healing your own units or applying buffs to them with an item if they have Nullify active, so try to keep that in mind. If you're running a unit that can apply this effect to itself, pay attention to when they have it active, try and get buffs on or healing before they activate it. It's certainly caught me off guard a few times. And there really just is nothing quite like wasting a whole turn for the unit that used the item, and then also making your own unit weaker by taking away some of their defenses. It really just kind of sucks overall, so pay attention to that. Our last entry is technically 3 status effects in a trench coat. It's the Bringer effects. What are the Bringer effects? Well, dear viewer, they are Stun Bringer, Poison Bringer, and Silence Bringer. What do they do? Well, what you'd probably expect given the names. The Bringer skills imbue the affected unit with the ability to inflict the named status effect on other units with their basic attacks. You'll most often see this via the White Knight's Paralysis Blade auto ability applying Stunbringer, and the Ninja's Bridle, Envenom, and Benumb auto ninjutsu spells. They're quite useful, as activating these abilities guarantees that your next physical attack will apply the effect. It's not a chance-based thing. Once this is active, choose what you want to hit with a big debuff, and hit them with it. It's nice. Ninjas are particularly nasty with this, thanks to their ability to wield ranged weapons like bows, so watch out. You either might be getting hit with some silence or poison or stun from afar, or you may very well be able to do the same to the enemy. Before we wrap up, I should also mention one other thing, which is the walk abilities that you may see crop up from time to time. In the past versions of the game, these used to be status effects that you could apply via various means, such as certain consumables. Now, they're basically just innate to different pants/shoes and rings. If you see things like Lava Walk, Blink Walk, Cloud Walk, and Water Walk, that's what we're talking about here. These are largely self-explanatory, so I don't want to take too much time on them, and they don't really warrant a full entry. The most notable thing is that Blink and Cloud Walk will save units who get knocked off of cliffs, and Blink Walk can also be used to hilarious effect with archers by allowing them to teleport to ridiculously high places before raining hell down on the enemy. Other than that, these abilities are largely situational, and it's going to be up to you to decide when to equip them once you have the ability to access them. And that, my friends, is your overview of the most common buffs and positive statuses you'll see in Tactics Ogre Reborn, as well as where you're likely to see them come from. Shorter and sweeter video today, but again, that's fine. These are the basics, and I hope that you guys found it useful. This is some of the more foundational knowledge in the game, and I imagine with all the new players we're seeing with the release of Reborn, there's at least some folks out there who needed to be brought into the know. There is, of course, plenty more Tactics Ogre content to come, as well as Fire Emblem Engage, so look forward to that. Again, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there, And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.